A brief, call this one of those momentary changes in topic because we were going to be talking about diabetes this morning with Russell Singleton from Tripp Family Medicine. But then Russell and Jeremy Daly got into a discussion about who was going to handle patients this morning. Russell had a busier schedule, so Jeremy is actually with us. And we're going to talk a little bit about vaccinations today, which has become somewhat of a hot topic across the land, wouldn't you say?
I would say so. I think it's, for the last probably 5 years been one of the biggest health topics out there as far as a little bit of controversy surrounding it and maybe a lot of controversy surrounding it.
It doesn't really, though. When it comes to adult vaccinations, there's no controversy really there. Um, we've had a discussion here about having a flu clinic right here in our building for the staff, and just about everyone was like, "Yeah, I'm in." Nobody. So if you're 35 years old, that's not really the big concern. In fact, certain ages, as you get older, you should be getting some of these vaccinations.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's mainly the yearly vaccination that we recommend is getting the flu shot every fall, and a lot of times that starts at the 1st of October that we start distributing and giving the flu vaccine. I know there's been some flu vaccines given already, even in September they're given, and it's a great thing. I've gotten it every year for many, many years, and I feel like it's been a great thing for me, but some people, they don't love it.
Well, I had what I thought last week was a cold, and it was pretty nasty at the beginning of the week.
Hmm.
Came on very suddenly. I started feeling the tickle in my throat on Sunday, and by Tuesday I was coughing to the point where I thought I was going to slip a disc or break a rib. And then it started to wane after that, but I'm still somewhat congested after. It always happens, for about a week or two afterwards. I'm still somewhat congested, and that clearing out takes a while. But there was a period in the middle of last week where I actually felt a little feverish. That doesn't normally happen with a cold, and I wondered maybe perhaps I had been an early case of influenza. Is it too early in September to actually be one of those?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you can see you see peak times of the virus, but I mean, you can really see the influenza virus all year long. It's not like it just goes away. It usually just is transmitted less often, and the environment isn't prime for that particular virus to thrive. So that's usually what it is just more of a situational thing where as it gets warmer, that virus tends to spread less, and most viruses do tend to spread less during the summer. And some of that has to do with the amount of time we spend inside and
Right.
things like that. But could have been, but the truth is even with some other virus, there's numerous viruses that mimic the flu, the para-influenza virus, for instance, or the metapneumovirus. Um, Working with an epidemiologist down in El Paso, I had the opportunity to pick his brain about some of the most common viral illnesses that we see cultured out, and those were the two that in that area we saw really often, and it was tough to differentiate between those viruses and the flu, and we don't vaccinate for those.
I uh, I know that most people, if they get a flu vaccine, they do it generally between Halloween and Thanksgiving. But you'd probably recommend they do it earlier than that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you can do it before Halloween, that's better. I think beginning of October is when we start to distribute the flu vaccine. So anytime after that and as soon uh, as possible is really the best time to get the flu vaccine, just because it really what it does is reduce your if you are infected, it doesn't prevent infection. It reduces the risk of severity of symptoms and duration of symptoms with the flu. So it might seem more like just a small cold rather than knock down, drag out 5 to 7 days of not getting out of bed and feeling like you might have been hit
Mhm.
by a truck.
Yeah. And for people who get this, it's not necessarily always a guarantee because you have to sort of predict what the strain might be, but you generally have a fairly good idea going into the season.
Sure, I mean it's the CDC that tries to make these assessments based on small changes that have happened as far as mutations in the virus over the year, and they do their best to mass produce these, and the timing is crucial. A couple of years ago, I guess it was probably 3 or 4 years ago, the the efficacy of the flu vaccine was quite low. The last few years, it's actually been pretty effective. So
And people can come to the office. I mean, they don't necessarily need to go to a clinic. They can come to the office and get it. If you're already a patient, that's going to be available.
Sure, sure. And when we have people there, we a lot of times, whether it's for, they're coming in for a cold, or and the truth is, a lot of the recommendations on these vaccines, and people don't know this, if you have a mild illness, an afebrile illness where you're not mounting a fever, maybe congestion and runny nose, there's no contraindication or reason that we shouldn't give you a vaccine. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, I can't go in and get my shot. I've just had the sniffles or whatever. I can't tell if it's allergies or a cold, but I can't get my vaccine." But you really can. You really can. But, people come in for any number of reasons, including diabetes and high blood pressure, and at that time we try to recommend them to get their flu shot and get on board.
Especially this time of year. We've got more coming up with Jeremy Daly, and he's joining us from Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls this morning. The office is located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office in Twin Falls. And I'd like to remind you they have a great slogan: "Life's too short not to feel good." Let me tell you, if you have the flu, you do not feel good. But if you can prevent the flu, or at least keep it minimized, you will feel better, and that's a great thing. Bill Colley with you as well this morning. We've got about 20 minutes left in Better Health. I hope you can stick around. We're at, I'm going to call it 8:40 and 39. Our studio guest is Jeremy Daly. He's joining us this morning from Tripp Family Medicine in Twin Falls. Bill Colley with you as well. We've bounced up to 42 at 8:42.
Hmm.
It's Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. We were talking a little bit about vaccines. Shelleen mentioned last week that the office will actually go on the road if somebody requests it. If you have a number of people working at a local company, let's say one of the local banks wants to sponsor this for all the people who work there, Tripp Family Medicine is more than willing to go do this at some particular place.
Sure, and it sounds like Shalene has a lot of that planned out. I know that they've done flu clinics in the past where they had a nurse go out, and basically everyone that wanted a flu vaccine, they could line up and get a shot and get it done with, and they didn't have to, spend a lot of time away from work and kind of inconvenience themselves to come into the clinic to have that done. So yeah, we I think Shalene's more than happy to work that out, and sounds like for people it can be a good thing as far as the convenience of it.
The office does, though, vaccines year round, and not just for the flu. You're doing them for all ages and for all different. Obviously, if you've got a kid going off to school, there's generally a laundry list of shots that child needs before they ever go to kindergarten.
Sure, sure, and those vaccines are the vaccines that we're just beginning to do. In the past, we have done things like the flu shot, tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough, the Tdap vaccine. Um, but for the most part, we had stayed with some of these basic vaccines, and we're just getting into um, basically the childhood immunization series where we're doing things like hepatitises and MMRs and varicellas and a numerous amount of different vaccines that are required for school.
We have a caller with us, and caller, we'd like to welcome you to Top Story in Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine at 8:44. You're on the air.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question for him. When you see people go to these places to get their flu shot and various things like that, and they pull it out of a cooler with their lunch, is that the temperature correct? Or that always made me nervous when I seen them walk in with an igloo and had the vaccine in it, but I kind of wondered about that. And also, I was going to give them a heads up on their ladies up front in their office are the best. I'm telling you what, that's a big part of their success.
Certainly, I definitely agree with you there. To speak to the temperature, that's a good question. I think most of the time, if we're storing vaccines long term, they have to be at a very specific temperature. We have a vaccine fridge that it has really rigorous standards as far as how often we check the temperature of that refrigerator, and basically the setup of the refrigerator itself has to be verified by people from the health department. They come and check the refrigerators and make sure that the temperature is optimal to maintain that vaccine long term. So, is it a little I guess worrisome to see it come out of a what looks like a lunch bag? I suppose so, but but know that those vaccines have been kept at the proper temperature, and this is just, basically a transport thing as far as bringing it from that igloo and into the.
You wouldn't actually have a sandwich in there.
I certainly hope not. I certainly hope
Yes.
not.
I do want to thank the caller. That's a good question. I have to say that when it comes to igloos, they are such an all-purpose. I bought one 17 years ago for $14. And 17 years later, so that's less than $1 a year. One of the best investments I ever made. The thing is about as durable as any product I've ever come across, and these are used for transporting all sorts of things in the medical industry, sometimes even organs, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're great at keeping the temperature at least short term where it should be, and preserving whatever needs to be preserved at that moment.
For the people who are coming in, and if they're looking for a vaccine right off the top, they may not be coming in for the wellness checkup or anything else. But if it's just the vaccine that they're looking for, this is going to be a pretty quick stop, I would imagine. They can come in, they get the shot, then they go.
Hmm.
You're not talking about having to devote half a day off from work.
No, no. We're a lot of times we can set that up as a nursing visit, and certainly we'd like you to give us some heads up so we can plan for it and prepare and have everything ready to go, so it's more efficient for you and for us. Um, but we do these nursing visits where they they bring you back, they give you the shot, and then you go. You don't have to see any one of the providers there before you have that done.
Again, you always have there's a group in this community, and they're very vocal, and they're in every community
Hmm.
that are just not sure about vaccines. And as I said earlier, they're not really worried so much about adults, but there's always been some concern about some parents about their children and any long-term effects. I know that when we were kids, we used to get the sugar cube when it came to, I think that was in the days when polio was still a threat.
Hmm.
And then later there were some theories that that sugar cube, that culture may have come from African monkeys, and that may have spread some other diseases, but nobody ever found could prove a link there. And is it are they unfounded in some of their concerns?
Yeah, and there are a lot of concerns out there. I mean, anything from vaccines causing autism to, giving kids so many vaccinations that it overwhelms the immune system. That there's toxins in the vaccines that are unsafe for children. Um, Kind of the thought that vaccines aren't worth it as far as the long-term health outcomes. There's a lot of reasons that people don't vaccinate their kids. I will say this: the CDC has kept track of the number of diseases that are, and these are the diseases that are actually diagnosed. So it's not necessarily the actual amount that exists out there, because many people don't receive treatment and they take care of things on their own, and never is it a statistic. But I will say this: in 2010, California saw whooping cough, which you know there's been a vaccine since 1940 for whooping cough, just for reference. Since In 2010, there was 9,120 cases of whooping cough documented, diagnosed in the state of California. Now, that was the most that has been seen diagnosed since 1940 or pre 1940. They haven't seen those numbers. So you look at the change that happens when people start to think, well, we haven't seen this disease, and we have the benefit. My generation has the benefit of really never seeing the measles or diphtheria or polio or any of these really pretty terrible diseases that
Hmm.
people got really often, and some of them can be life altering diseases, and some of them are deadly. The measles, 1 in 500 people that got the measles died, and so we see that it is a disease. These are diseases that actually cause a lot of problems. Um, and I saw the same thing my first year practicing in Texas. There was a huge surge, 150% increase in whooping cough, and it was all based on the fact that there were so many people that were not vaccinating, and the disease was spreading again.
I grew up in a part of the country where a third of the population was Amish, and it was often there'd be an epidemic or an outbreak during the winter, and because they did not get vaccinated. We have a caller with us. Caller, you're on the air about 10 minutes from 9 o'clock. Go ahead.
Well, Bill, to go backwards just a hair, my company that I work for, we're the major distributor of flu vaccine for the country. And our strenuance on those cartons that the flu zone and your vaccines are all sent on are all regulated by the CDC. We're following strict guidelines of the federal government to make sure they arrive safely to the doctor's offices, and there's precautions taken inside of every case and everything. So people shouldn't have to worry about the sterility of the drugs when they arrive, because we follow all the guidelines on doing that, so you're safe on all your vaccines and flu shots. So get your flu shots.
Great plug there.
They didn't come in on the back of a banana truck, in other words.
I guess not.
Hey, speaking of shots, maybe it's because of the programs I watch. You know, the advertisers know the demographics. So I see a lot of these about shingles. Now, I had chicken pox. I was probably in the second grade, I think, nearly 50 years ago,
Hmm.
and still have a couple of chicken pox scars, in fact, on my forehead. But the latest push is for people in my age demographic to get these shingles vaccines. Would they prevent it from an outbreak, or would it just alleviate, reduce some of the symptoms of it?
Yeah, so really, what does a vaccine do? So so you expose your body to either a weakened virus or a dead virus, right? And what does your body do? It produces these cells that are built to fight infection. They're called antibodies. And it produces a large number of those, and your body's able to recognize that particular virus or bacteria. In this case, it's a virus that we're looking at, and it allows your body to respond. It allows your body to actually produce a response quickly to keep uh, an infection or a bad infection from happening. So sometimes people may feel like they have a cold or something like that, and that's not uncommon to see with the shingles, where they feel kind of viral type upper respiratory symptoms. But the big thing that we always worry about is that darn shingles rash that turns into blisters and it's
Right.
painful and things like that. So the theory is that maybe if you have a reactivation of that particular virus that basically has been stored inside a nerve root in your body for years and years, and for whatever reason, when you're immunocompromised, you're weakened, or whatever the case may be, you have an outbreak. And along that, what's called a dermatome, that nerve pathway along the skin, you get an outbreak of these painful blisters, and the theory is that your body would prevent some of that from happening, and maybe even stop that from happening. So that's the theory behind the shingles vaccine.
A lot of people that watch these TV commercials, and they say, "See your doctor, ask your doctor," and in a way, it almost people are coming in asking a lot of questions about various things they probably don't need.
Sure. Yeah, there is a lot of medications out there. There's a lot of new treatment options out there that may not be appropriate for those people, but that's our job. We're happy to talk to people about those things, and either give them education on treatment options or say, no, that's not for you.
I was going to ask a couple of quick questions. So you're doing vaccines in-house for young people as well as the flu vaccine.
Hmm.
Are there any other vaccines that you would recommend people coming to the office that they should at least consider?
Sure. So the big vaccines that we try to push on a regular basis, because there's benefit to them, are things like the Tdap vaccine that we discussed earlier. So tetanus,
Mm.
diphtheria, and acellular pertussis. So those vaccines are important to get. Tetanus should be updated every 10 years. So if you haven't got a tetanus shot recently and you work with your hands and you have exposure to things that are rusty and unclean, it might be a good idea to get updated on that. And many times people come into the office. A couple of patients last week came in and had to stitch them up because they split open their fingers, and we made sure their tetanus was up to date at the time. So we did that.
And that, again, you mentioned a lot of these. Some vaccines can likely last a lifetime, but others are going to be a flu vaccine is just 1 year duration, and a tetanus, as you pointed out, is just 10 years. So it's good to ask at least the provider some questions about how long these things are going to last.
Sure, and sometimes, if depending on your occupation in healthcare, we have to a lot of times we have to verify immunity. So even if you've had some vaccinations, we have to do titers to make sure that you're your body's actually made antibodies and maintained antibodies over the years sufficient to prove that you're immune against certain infections. So that's really important. Um, but as far as regular, I lost my train of thought.
I was going to point out, we got about a minute to go.
Yeah.
When I was working my way through college in a hospital kitchen, I had to have the tetanus shot updated. I had to take a TB test. There were all sorts of things I had to do, even though I didn't have a lot of direct interaction with patients. The law was you
Sure.
do this, and that's we tend to forget that this is a very well regulated business that you're involved in.
Yeah, and the amount of training that goes into being able to administer vaccines is pretty incredible. Our nurses have to be very well trained, and they have to understand when they can be given and where they can be given and the side effects and all of those things that are potential with the vaccine. So it's not something that we just give someone a shot and say good luck. We try to be well educated on the things that we're doing and the treatments that we're giving patients.
If people need to get in touch with anyone at the office, how do they go about doing that?
They can get a hold of us at 933-4400. They can get to know us a little bit better on our website at trippfamilymedicine.com, or they can learn about kind of our current events on Facebook or Instagram, see what we're doing in the community.
The peel party's coming up, a couple of them. In fact, they can see all of that online.
Yes, yes. So if you're interested in having a chemical peel, this would be a good time to learn about it and give us a call and get your name on the list so we can take care of you.
I want to thank Jeremy Daly for coming by today, and we'll see you again in a couple of weeks in the rotation, the pitching rotation.
We'll see.
Getting into that time with the divisional playoff series, so we'll see more and more of Jeremy. We've got news coming up in just a moment at 9 o'clock from Fox, and then one more hour of Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and NewsRadio1310.com.